Welcome to our Women's Space Vancouver March webinar. And we're going to have a conversation with Faika El-Nagashi. Before we start to introduce Faika, I want to thank you for joining us and tell you a bit about Women's Space. We're a Vancouver-based grassroots feminist nonprofit society, and we're working to protect and reclaim women's rights. So that's including the right to retain spaces and organizations created by and for women. And to do that, we lobby governments, media, other institutions. We work on campaigns in solidarity with other groups on particular issues. And we participate in public political actions and protests occasionally and host online webinars like this one. So if you want to find out more about what we do and what we stand for, please visit our website at YVR.com, or just search Women's Space Vancouver in a search engine and you'll find us. So we called this event Political Courage, and in part because courage is such an important word, but also Faika talks about that and Athena talks about that and what they're doing in Europe. And it's Political Courage, Women's Rights and Democracies in Europe, which is where Faika is organizing. And it's because of her courageous work that we wanted to have Faika here. She's a special guest. She's super busy. She's at a conference right now in Dublin and took a break out to come to her hotel to speak with us. So Faika, thank you. Welcome. It's a great honor to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're a political scientist. It says that's your training. You were a parliamentarian. You were a member of parliament with Austria's Green Party. You've worked in human rights advocacy for all your adult life, it sounds like. Human rights, women's rights, migrant rights, LGBT issues. And now you're centering your work on addressing these ideological shifts that are happening in many parts of the world, and for you in Europe, and all in the name of inclusion. And it's affecting women's rights and gay and lesbian rights. And it's affecting the democratic debate or lack thereof in Europe. So you're the founder of something called the Athena Forum, which is really exciting. You've got this up and running. It seemed so quickly. I'm sure you worked hard before we all became aware of it. But we're going to talk about all of those things a bit. So it's great to have you here as a guest. And to start us off, Faika, tell us a bit about what motivated you as a young woman to become an activist, to become a politician, to be who you are now.
Well, I mean, becoming a politician was not really on my list. Though, to be honest, somehow it was there. I mean, I remember some of my colleagues at school, they would say, "Oh, she will end up at the UN."
Oh.
So there will be something political around what I do. I was always interested in having discussions and understanding ideas, but so when I started to study, and that brought me out from the small village that we're living in to the capital city, to Vienna, and to university there. By that time, I had come out as a lesbian, and I was seeking out spaces where I could, meet with others, socialize, but somehow also I was drawn to doing something. And so I found lesbian and gay groups at university and got more active and got more involved. And I really liked to do things, organize a campaign and an action week and maybe just a film screening, a lesbian film screening. It was the end of the 90s. So we were, there were so few films that came out. It was really nice to then watch them together. And then somehow someone told me that there's a conference by an LGBT group, and it's in Budapest. It's not far from Vienna, and I should really go there and attend. And so I did. And then I really got sucked into this world of activism, political activism. I was fascinated meeting other young people who all had a very diverse background and biography. Well, first of all, they came from all over Europe, but then also I worked with groups that were called women from minorities, for example, or young women from minorities. So we really shared very diverse backgrounds. And I myself, with my own personal family biography. I did not stand out. I was just like everyone had some kind of no, I don't know, mixed background or some added aspect, where it was sexual orientation or a religious belief, and we could learn from each other and understand who we were, but then we could also leave that aside and focus on the issues that we were looking at. And so I did conferences and political activism, well, for quite some time throughout my youth, so definitely for 10 years or so, and really just enjoyed the learning process. So well, first of all, you meet strangers and then you leave almost as friends, but then also you learn about things that you know nothing about, and your world just keeps expanding and gets bigger and bigger. And while I was doing this, I started to work, and I worked in a migrant women's organization in Vienna on issues around women in the sex industry and trafficked women and the rights of migrant women. And so I did civil society organizations for 15 years or so. I ended up going to Brussels and to work for a big LGBTIQ organization there. I thought that was fantastic. That actually was on my list at one point. But it was still not very fulfilling. And I felt that the civil society sector has limitations. Well, clearly through funding. You're somehow always dependent in the political sense also on the funder, and often state funding. And then there was just a job opening with the Greens. And until that point, I never had any political party affiliation. I did all my political work as activism. And I thought I could give it a try and see if I like it or not, and could always leave if it's not working out. I was very skeptical, very critical of the Greens when I joined. That was in 2013. And after working with the Greens for about a year, I was working around politicians, and that was on the provincial level of the Viennese municipality. And I saw what the politicians were doing, and I really felt like this is a big part of it is what I've been doing previously also in my civil society NGO work. And I really thought, I think I could do it. I think this is something I could also do. But then to run internally, that's a whole different level of power play that you have to understand and immerse yourself in. So there is this game here. I'm not sure if you also have a version of it. Here we call it Mafia or Werewolf. It's like a role-playing game where you have different roles, and some are citizens, innocent citizens, and others are the mafia, and they are out to kill the innocent citizens. And what the game is, everybody is potentially lying to you all the time. And I would always say being in politics is like playing this game, playing mafia 24 hours a day. There is so much lying and intrigue, and it is so much about power in the background. So it is quite, I would really say that politics is a toxic environment, an absolutely toxic environment. So I did that for 10 years then, and then, moved on to the national level and became a member of parliament in Austria with the Greens. And so I also found that with the Greens, though they would always say of themselves that they are quite anti-authoritarian and critical of power and power relations and power structures, and want to dismantle them and want to have egalitarian relations and the flat hierarchy. In practice, it's not true at all. And then also in recent years, when I spoke out publicly with a gender critical position, and I experienced internally in the party all the attacks against me, it became very clear that there is such a strong authoritarian attitude and position with the Greens. I think for many who've experienced that, and I think you can see that with the Greens from Australia to Austria to the UK, Scotland, Ireland, and over, I'm sure, also in Canada and in the US, you will see that you will find it everywhere. It's very authoritarian, And that's quite disappointing because it's not only about the issues themselves. So, what kind of feminism is that? All of these Green parties think of themselves as being feminist, then they turn anti-feminist, and then they turn authoritarian on top. So that was my time in politics, and then because of all of the attacks that I've experienced from within the party. So there were open letters against me signed by my party colleagues and internal hearings and so on. So all of that actually really, and I did run again, but it became impossible within the party to get a place that would, secure a spot at the election. Also, the Greens then kept losing at the election, so there might be some connection with how the Greens also have changed as a party. But then I decided also last year to leave the Greens, formally to leave them and to do that very publicly. And there was quite good media coverage of that, which I'm happy about because I was often quoted with my own words, with my criticism about the party. And I still think that that's actually a helpful offer to them that I made. If you want to listen, here's what I'm saying. You can consider it. You can take it in. You can change something maybe.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I've just recently been asked by a provincial group of the Greens to speak at an event that they're organizing in May. So I think that's a very good thing because it also shows that not everybody with the Greens is in agreement with party leadership.
Well, and what you're describing that your colleagues did to you and did to the party is the opposite of what you were talking about before, that you went into organizations and you learned things, people had different views and perspectives, you worked together, and it was such a betrayal and so cowardly the way that they ostracized you, and this idea of open letters in public really it's such a cowardly way to address an issue, and it's so personally hurtful and insulting, and it's shutting down any debate or disagreement.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear you've been invited to something to talk.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really embarrassing. That's what I think of it today. But back then, when I got to know of it, there is an open letter against me. It was very painful. I'm not the kind of person who's used to being attacked in that way, or I should say, I was not that kind of person.
Yeah.
I am now. And then you read, you basically you turn left and right, and it's like your colleagues who were sitting next to you have signed this open letter against you. And yes, I do know it is very performative, but it does not take away the sting of it. No. But now thinking of it, just thinking about this open letter as a method, it's truly embarrassing. And I don't think that it really had the effect maybe that they hoped to have. One of its effects that they hoped for was to shut me up. And that's not what happened at all. So it is a very aggressive. So though yes, it is performative, but it is very aggressive also.
Yeah, it is for sure. And so the is it a younger group of Greens, new Greens that are inviting you, or there's just
no, not even. It's a provincial group, so it's not the capital.
Yeah.
The capital would always be most difficult, but those in the rural area, they have other realities. And so I find it very interesting because it will be an evening discussion with me. It's not even, I'm not part of a panel. They talk with me publicly and they will announce it as a public event. So I really think that's good because it shows a disruption. Everybody knows I left this party over criticism, and it is not a concession, but I mean, I agree to go into that discussion, and they also took this step to ask me. So I don't think, there would not be a reconciliation or anything, but I think it's very good for people to see, and many people watch and observe and take note, even if they don't actively engage in any of these debates or discussions.
Right. So it may build courage among some people too.
I would really hope so. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And then you talked about over the years you were involved in lesbian and gay issues, but also lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans. The beginning when the alphabet was a little bit shorter, and we
Yeah.
all know it's extended a lot. And there was a time in 2022 when you were invited to speak at that first European Lesbian Conference, and then were you invited to speak and then your participation was canceled, or were you just attending and your participation
Yeah.
was
I
canceled?
mean, I had a longer history with that organization.
Right.
So in 2017, they organized a lesbian conference in Vienna, which was their first conference.
Okay.
And back then, I was one of the opening speakers as a local politician.
Right.
Was very happy about that. And then they, invited me to join their board meetings, and increasingly I became more and more active, and I became a board member, was the treasurer. I was quite involved with the organization. And in 2019, they organized their second conference in the Ukraine. And by that time, I was a very active team member. I co-moderated that conference. Was very involved with them. And that involvement just stopped for other reasons. I became, a member of parliament. There was less time, and I just left the board, which was fine. And then after the pandemic in 2022, they were organizing the next conference, and that was in Budapest. And I was very excited about that because, in general, I like to go to conferences. It's a good perspective to meet with a few hundred other lesbian women, lesbian and bisexual women. And it was in Budapest, which is the city where I was born in. So I was really looking forward to that, and have been in touch with one or two of them before about me going there. We were amicable. I had registered just as a participant, and then the day before the conference started, I think 5 minutes to midnight or so, I got an email informing me that I have been unregistered. And so basically, I got banned from attending the conference even. And the only explanation that they gave was they said because of my recent public statements
Right.
that I've made in the media. So they didn't say what it was that I had said. And up until then, and I think even to this day, my statements have been very, very moderate, very factual. I'm not going around in a hateful or aggressive way. So that was a shame that they did not engage with what it was actually that made them ban me. And the signal that this was sending was, of course, that not every lesbian is allowed to attend the lesbian conference, only those with the right thoughts, with the correct thoughts. And even if you have wrong thoughts, then you're not allowed to say them. So that was really a transgression, I felt, for a lesbian conference to police other lesbians like that. And so I made it public
Right.
because I knew, I mean, it would cause that there would be attention that it would draw, because I was still at that point a member of parliament in Austria with the Greens, a lesbian, and as you said in the introduction, lifelong human rights advocate. So if you can kick me out, and if that's what you do, then what chance does anyone else stand? Do you have to have the right political position to be allowed to attend? Like, what exactly are the thoughts, or is the ideology that would allow you to participate, or not?
Right. And is this at the time, did you know that they were thinking, like, I know that I saw L had an asterisk beside it
Hmm.
in this organization, or in this event, and so meaning that lesbian means more than homosexual woman. It's including men. Was that part? Did they include trans women or men who
Yeah,
identified as lesbians?
yeah, yeah. So we had these discussions. They were recurring discussions within the team from the very beginning.
Mm.
And it was clear this it was a fairly new organization when I joined them, that were trying to establish themselves on the European level. And to really establish yourself and to be able to do something that's impactful all the time, full time, you need resources. And so you need resources, and to be able to access the resources, you need the support of friendly organizations. So now the big existing LGBTIQ plus organizations on the European level, and they wanted to be a European organization, European and Central Asian even, are all trans activist organizations. So there are 4 others. So the ELC, the lesbian organization, but there were already 4 other existing organizations. IGLIO, which is a youth group that I was active with when I was young. ILGA Europe, which was the one that I worked with in Brussels, which is the main LGBTIQ plus organization. Then there's TGEU, which is a trans organization, so it's Transgender Europe. And then there's OII, which is Organization Intersex International, with its European branch. So it's an intersex organization, but with a very trans activist positioning. So these were the 4 friendly organizations whose support they had to get so that they would be allowed to enter this very competitive arena of civil society organizations that look for funding, be it from philanthropic foundations or the European Commission. And one of the first questions in interviews with funders, and these are foundations such as Mama Cash, for example, in the Netherlands, that fund women's projects or women's organizations, or Austria in the US, who fund lesbian organizations and lesbian projects globally. Well, one of the first questions already in these funding interviews was, are you trans inclusive? So this was a choice that the organization then made to be able to establish themselves, be able to access resources. And what you then, you do not only answer a question, you don't only have to answer a question, you have to then have the evidence for it. So the evidence means you have to report. Did you have, when you had events, when you had a conference, did you have speakers? Did you have trans-identified speakers? Did you have workshops, trans-led workshops? Did you focus on it in the topic? Does your language reflect it? Do you do all the surrounding things like pronouns on your name tags? Do you have team members who are trans, board members who are trans? So it then becomes this thing that really wholly captures your organization. And so that's the direction that they then went. And in that context, somebody thought it was a good idea to ban me from their conference.
And were there other women that were walked away or talked to you or anything like that? Or were you?
I do remember that when I was in Budapest, because I did go there. I mean, I had my train tickets booked, my hotel booked. So I was set to go, you know. So I did go there, and I also said I'm happy to meet up with, you know, whoever wants to talk to me. And I did meet with some lesbian feminists in Hungary, Hungarians, who were very happy to exchange with me, because they've been in a very difficult position in Hungary. They have, you know, a government that is very much pushing against what they call gender ideology. And at the same time, they feel that all of their lesbian and gay organizations have become queer organizations and are very strongly bringing in that gender ideology. And they are somewhere in between and trying to survive. So I met with some of them. And then I also met, I think I remember 2 participants who I've also known from before, who were at the lesbian conference. We met at the cafe. And I really remember walking up to them. They were sitting at a table and we saw each other and we all just started crying. You know, it was such a difficult thing to really know. Yeah, but it's not so much on the cognitive level. But you experience, you're part of this, how one of you is shunned and cast out of the community. And though they, you know, they were supportive to me in the sense that I was really happy that we would meet up. but they could not really intervene in a way to stop it or to change it, or they still wanted to be part of that, you know. So, and all of that, we all knew all of that. It was all there between us. So I do appreciate them coming out for that, but it affects so many more than just that one individual. It sends, not only does it send the message, but also on that, on the emotional level, it affects those who are involved in the community to see something like this happen and unfold.
Right, right. Yeah, and we don't have to go into it too much more. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but this kind of leads me to this idea that lesbians are in a particular position. I guess lesbians and gay men as well, but we're talking about women here. Lesbians, because we're tied to, like it or not, we are associated by this alphabet. Some of us have been part of a lesbian and gay community before, or been activists in that way. Some of us have been part of just lesbian community or feminists. Like there's so many, we've all done different things, but we're tied to them against our will. We're tied to this larger thing now called queer that has many letters, too many to mention that. Everybody just calls it queer. And we're also, some of us are feminists, so we're working for women's rights. And I feel like many assumptions are made about us on both sides that I think puts us in a particularly kind of, it's like sandpaper or something. It's a rough road that we can go if we want to start talking about these things in different places. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. But like the situation for lesbians was never great.
No.
So when I think back, when I began my activism, it was largely lesbian and gay. A little bit, sometimes it was LGBT, but in a very different way from today. But we would have to, well, have actual political fights with the gay men about having resources for lesbians, about having spaces for lesbians. I would go to a lot of conferences, mixed conferences, and so lesbian and gay, men and women, and we would want to have a lesbian-only workshop, a women-only workshop at that conference, or women's space at that conference, or a women-only evening. And it was really difficult, fights with the men about it, because they had no understanding at all, and no interest at all. They said, this is a mixed conference, that's it. Why do you want to do your separatist thing, or to have a whole separate women's conference within these mixed organizations? And gay men, many of them did not understand why we wanted to have that space, or at times opt out of the mixed spaces, or how the way that gay men made use of the conference space was very different from the way that lesbians did. Because when you're young and when you meet in such a context, it's also a social space. It's also a social space to meet up. And there were very different, there was very different social behavior also around that. And for the lesbians and the women, just to have the chance to talk about things in a very different way. So the situation was never good. And this is just an example, I mean, every lesbian bar most of the time struggled. Women only bookstores that we used to have, bookshops. And now there's this layer of seemingly it's about inclusion and equality and progress, and so much progress that again you do not even see the lesbians, like it. We do not even exist as a category anymore, not even with the name. This asterisk that has to go as a virtue signal after every time the lesbian is mentioned is such an aggression towards the existence of, as small as it might have been, of something that's separate and that's legitimate and that's lesbian. So there was only a very little time of of this untouched existence
Mhm.
in the mixed movements. So of course you can have lesbian separatism that was separate, and continues to be so, very marginal now, I think. But in the mixed context, it was always a fight.
Mhm.
And now, when it's about resources,
Mhm.
there's almost no other way than to, well, then I'm 100% sure there is no other way than to make it about the whole queer spectrum, and then to push for something that might benefit also some lesbians,
Mhm.
but on the cost of giving up the lesbian category and saying men can equally be lesbians. So you're not really gaining anything by that. And on the contrary, you're really endangering
Mhm.
young lesbians, old lesbians, everyone in between,
Mhm.
by just, giving it up completely.
Mhm. Mhm. And then there's after the Supreme Court decision last April in the UK that upheld sex segregated bathrooms, change rooms, prisons, etc. Um, Although they're still fighting, as we know about that. But there was trans activists that threw out this idea like this is going to affect butch lesbians. Butch lesbians won't be able to go into the washroom, and so then a group of lesbians were being used as a strategy to uphold that anybody could go in any washroom they like. So it's just it's a confounding, it's anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there is I mean, to look at it properly, there is such a stigma around being a lesbian,
Mm-hmm.
and there always was. So when I was young and I came out as a lesbian, and I remember when I was maybe 12 or so, and I fell in love with a teacher, and that was the first time I heard the word lesbian mentioned in my family. Somehow, my brother somehow brought it up. I didn't know the word. I knew immediately it was nothing good. And so then a bit later, a few years after, when I came out, I did take on that word. I didn't have an issue with it. I really got to like it. But then I saw, when I was in my 20s, around that time, the word queer came up. And I saw how young lesbians started to move away from the label lesbian and went to embracing being queer. Queer never spoke to me. But of course, the moment you get a way out of the whole stigma that comes with being a lesbian, you take it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, let's say, 30 years ago. And so now, today, there's it's not even an option anymore to just be lesbian. And the stigma didn't go away. It's not as if you would have different categories. They're all without stigma, and now you're free to choose. You can be lesbian, that's great. You can be non-binary, that's great. You can be gender fluid. That's not the reality. If you look up lesbian, you will either, you will find this the pornified version of what lesbian is. You have this hypersexualization around it, and on the other hand, you have this discourse that says, well, lesbians are man haters, are not really women, are not female. They are male, they are masculine. There's something transgressive about them that puts them out of the category of woman. And lesbians know that. Maybe more even, some years or decades ago, when we had something like a lesbian community, where we could not only talk about all of this, but we also saw quite a diversity of lesbians. And we actually did see butch lesbians, or very very different ages, and also talk about their experiences, and also different social groups, not only academics meeting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so this stigma is one of the strongest stigmas that you have around a certain group of women, where you can, or not you, but society and a very patriarchal aspect of it can exclude them from being women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's being done to lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's being done especially to butch lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
And this has not concerned anyone. And this is not what trans activists are concerned with. And this is not the analysis that they are making. And to claim that space, to be a woman, regardless of sexual orientation or, haircut or, whatever way one would, whatever role one would want to claim on a social level. So regardless of all of that, to assert that we are women. Mm-hmm. But to get rid of that stigma is very difficult and almost impossible, because nowadays you have an additional aspect to it, that if you say and you insist that you're a lesbian, you're even suspicious, because why are you not queer? Why are you not just gay, maybe? What is it that's so peculiar about you saying and being a lesbian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then it comes into the misogyny thing, and also how even if we say we're lesbians or we're women's rights activists, then that's already a category that is now being considered as transphobic or anti-trans. Is that then you're taking a statement by just using simple language that we've always used: women's rights, lesbian rights. Okay, you're already in the bad group. But I appreciate getting into that with you, Faika, and let's move a little bit to the Athena Forum, because it's such a big category and such a big thing now that you're doing. And so you're the founder and director of this new European initiative. And I love that you say it's one of the things on the website: sex-based rights, democratic values, and political courage. And I'm really interested in courage is a word I'm using more, or maybe I don't even know if I ever used it, but I'm using it these days more. I want to talk about that. But first, can you talk about what inspired this project? How did you develop this broad network, and what are you up to?
Yeah. So after I got out of politics, which was towards the end of 2024, I've been thinking about what to do myself, but also about what has to be done. And what I saw from my time in politics, especially towards the end, was how close the relationship was between the supranational level, the European institutional dimension, and what progressive parties and trans activist groups were pushing for on the national level. So often we would get draft legislation about something, conversion therapy bans, for example, and it would reference a European Parliament resolution, a Council of Europe vote, maybe a statement by a Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, this and that, and it would give weight to it. So it was no longer about the national context and really discussing the issue, but they were zooming out and saying, look, there is human rights consensus around this. This is European state of the art. This is what we have to do. If we don't do it, we're I don't know. I mean, we're very slow to implement all of this, or we might even be in breach of something, because nobody really understood. So when I say nobody, I mean especially the conservatives, who were the ones who were lobbied by the progressives. So the progressives were pushing for it. They had to convince their partners to get a majority. So the conservatives often, and they would often say, well, I mean, okay, so this is something we have to do because the European Union asks us to or obliges us to do. So I was well aware of this dimension and its effect on the national levels. For some time, I was trying to get other established organizations to understand this and to take this issue on. I was looking towards the UK because there are so many organizations. And I was trying to tell them, look what's going on here and the rest of Europe. So some of it is Council of Europe, and UK is part of the Council of Europe. Other other things are European Union. Then I understood that this is something that they will not do. They are not able to do because of lack of resources, scope of work, interest. There's so much going on nationally in the UK also. And I also knew that with my background in political activism, in civil society, and in politics, I bring everything that I would need to establish this myself. So it had to be done. And so I did it. I did not volunteer, ahead of maybe trying to look at other options. But then when there were no other options, I started to think about how to do this and to set it up. We launched more or less 5 months ago. It's been a short time, seems like forever. When we launched, we also presented a report. So just before that, last summer, I had written a report together with a colleague who's very knowledgeable about all of these European developments also. And we wanted to do this as an exercise also for ourselves to bring order to our thoughts around all of this and to lay out how the institutional capture happened over the past 15 years and where we are at now. So that's what we do in this report. It's online on our website. And that was how we then entered the arena and said, okay, so now we're here and we're very serious about what we're doing. And one of the main tasks ahead of us is to not only monitor what is going on, because there is so much happening, a lot is happening, to monitor it, but then to make it public so that there is even knowledge about all of that going on, and to, if possible, translate it in a way that it becomes more accessible to a general public and audience, and also to media. And we want to draw attention to it. If there's a vote in European Parliament, like it was now a few weeks back, that said it was not a law or a binding decision, but just a vote on a recommendation that says we emphasize the importance to recognize trans women, as they say, as women. If there's something like this, we want people to know. And we want them then to also hold their politicians accountable. They have been doing all of this behind closed doors for 15 years. It was like a playground with largely no real disturbance or intervention from anyone. And now we're just taking these things, bring them to daylight, and break them down a bit, give some context and analysis to it so people can then discuss. And then we want to be having these debates and discussions around it. And so when we say political courage, I think that's really one of the things that is absolutely lacking. And I see so many women who would say of themselves, it's not me, but they would say of themselves, they are ordinary women. I'm just here at this conference in Dublin that was organized by very ordinary women. They are not activists, they're not politicians. So many ordinary women, teachers, parents, I talked to an electrician tonight, all kinds of different backgrounds are active, are exposing themselves, are risking very much, are speaking out. And then you have politicians who really lack the courage to put themselves there and position themselves clearly. And the lack of political courage comes especially from the center, the political center, so the conservatives, the Christians, all those in the center who try to evade the topic altogether. And what we do is we try to address this and also to push them in a way that we are shaming them for what they're doing or not doing. But at the same time, we're also modeling to them how they can actually do something like this publicly, how they can be critical and factual, how they can do it in a respectful way, how can they do this and not alienate others maybe in their political field. And so if we can do this, then this is the least that I expect from elected politicians who do this as a job. So we really find that the aspect of political courage is something that's missing, and there is so much cowardice that's not, I think it's not really necessary anymore after years of women who have been, putting themselves out there and exposing themselves fully and risking and losing so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Yes, I totally agree. And we have very few in Canada political representatives. We have very few, if any, in the media. I don't think any that I can think of, or maybe one or two. These people are always affiliated or perceived as far right. If they're not far right, they're called far right. They're dismissed as being, this is some American problem. This is coming from Trump. That's the weapon that's used here a lot, is and it works, because I see people, including many that I know or have met or just know of, who believe or know certain things that are true, and they will not speak of them in any company or in very little company. And it's hard to know how to move those people, how to move politicians. I communicate with politicians when I can. They either just send me a cut and paste policy thing and you should read more of this, you're obviously ignorant about, they just take me as I don't understand it enough, and here's some links, and then silence. And many of them, it's just silence first and not sending anything. But it's very frustrating. And I think you coming together like this, you building a network, and how many countries are represented in your network from Europe, Faika?
Well, in our expert network at this point, we have 10 experts from 10 different European countries,
right.
But we are in touch with many more. So it has been challenging to find also individuals with a certain standing, with some expertise, because with the expert network, we say, so there's a specific field, let's say education or academia, research, clinicians. So we're looking for somebody who has expertise in a specific field and can be public with their name and with their face. So this also has been challenging in countries throughout Europe.
Yes, yes.
I had many conversations, and I don't know women in Greece, in Malta, in the Ukraine even. So there was a woman in the Ukraine who has a contract with the UN and cannot risk the contract with the UN. In Hungary even, though the political situation in Hungary is different, but still was a researcher who is involved in research projects and networks, and they do get funding from elsewhere.
Right.
So it was in many countries, it is very high risk still to put yourself out like that publicly. But at the same time, everything that we do, every public intervention, every individual who's visible in our network gives a push, motivation, courage to those who cannot yet do it, or who are very close to saying, okay, I will do it. Of course, you have to be in the position. You should not ruin yourself. You have to make a good, rational assessment whether that's possible for you or not. But you can see that it really motivates others to see that there is a group that most of us come from the left, from progressive groups and parties, from the Greens or liberals. It's not a condition at all. We would be open also to conservatives, but it just happens that most of us come from that political side. But we don't make this an issue of, are you on the left or on the right?
Mhm.
And so to many, this is very mm, helpful that it is the way that we are trying to do it. It's not in that context. I'm always thinking of maybe, a teacher at a school in France, let's say, and she has a discussion with her colleagues about social transitioning. And her colleagues might be very hostile and would say, well, you with your position, that's just Putin and Orban and Trump. That's that rhetoric that you're using. And she can point to our organization and to our website and say, no, this is what I'm aligning myself with. And look, here is an expert on education, and she says this and that. And this is the organization that articulates that position. And you can pull yourself out of this political war.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And how about media in Europe? What kind of response or exposure are you getting, or interest from people from the media?
So this is one of our focus areas, is to have media reporting and to breach the media silence. And we are looking to talk to mainstream media as much as possible and less to fringe media.
Mhm.
But then there's also a dynamic. So sometimes a more fringe outlet will take it up first, and then there will be a dynamic around it, and it will move a bit more towards the mainstream. So we did have quite good reporting around one specific issue that we talked about, that is the so-called LGBTIQ plus equality strategy of the European Union. And one of the strategy is like a roadmap, an action plan of what the EU, the Commission would like to do.
Mhm.
So it's not law, and it will not turn into law.
Right.
And one of their policy points is that they would like to promote self-ID without age restrictions, without age limits across Europe. This was something that if you make this public, most people across Europe will be quite shocked about this, because the lack of an age limit makes it something that you can just not follow this. If you've not been living in the trans activist world, this comes as like, why would we want to have children legally change their sex? It's not as, far gone maybe as it is in Canada with this discussion. So media were quite interested in reporting about this specific aspect, and coverage was good. And at other times, it's very difficult to get media to report something, because these institutions are also quite detached at the same time from people's realities and also from media reporting. Council of Europe, for example, is less relevant in the European Union. So it is a challenge also, because we're looking at the whole European scope. So that's dozens of different European languages, and political and cultural contexts where all of this media is embedded in.
Mhm.
So we have a section on our website now, a media section, and there we have all of the media reporting. And I think if you look at it like that, it's quite impressive already, but there's much more potential of what we could do.
Mhm.
Well, we also see that a lot of journalists are quite happy that we are here, and that now when they have a story, they can come to us and we will give them a quote, and they can report in a more balanced way about it. Because up until recently, there was just no other side that was looking at these European developments that they could ask for comment. And many journalists are also fed up with the internal policies and with their editors, you know, um, closing their stories. It has become very difficult for them to report about any of this in a critical way. But so now, first of all, we try to present them what a story could be. So this is a story. This is going on here. Have a look at it. But then we also give them the more balanced angle to their story. So it's no longer just the trans activist voices that give them a certain very specific framing and narrative around it.
Right, right. Yeah, it sounds like you're providing a lot of opportunities and openings just by being there, and not to mention all the resources and the into more plain language, or language that people can understand, that's not backroom bureaucratic language with terminology that people as a rule, don't necessarily understand, or they think it's law because it's mentioned or it's recommended and all of that. Well, before we, I mean, it's amazing what you're doing, and I think many of us would keep on following that. It would be, I would love to see something like that in Canada at some point. That kind of level of people with different expertise that can work together to provide information and to consult and to write reports. That's so important.
Thank you.
Before we go to questions, just because you mentioned that, most of the people, and I know it's not just women in Athena, you've got some male representatives as well. You say that most of the people are from the left, but that's not a qualification, and you have specific focuses. But you wrote this essay that I found really interesting, and we'll just touch on it quickly. But you wrote an essay called In Defense of Intersectionality, which I really appreciated. And like you, I've noticed that a number of women who would criticize gender ideology have that as a one issue, and sometimes they take on or criticize anything they perceive as, woke, and I'll put that in quotations, left wing, or what the intersectionality, that the interpretation of that word, which really, those of us that have been aware of that word for a long time, is the consideration of race and racism and class and sexual orientation and many other parts of women's lives, people's lives. And then when you left the queer community, you found yourself mostly working with white women, and that often race and class are not conversations or considerations. And I'm just wondering how that is. I mean, it's a big topic, but and I see that, and I'm concerned about that here. How does that fit into Athena? Are there other conversations about, migrant women or race and class within the context of what you're working on, or is that just a separate?
Well, I wrote that as a personal reflection when I wrote this article or this text. There were a lot of things going on at that time online. I was just observing a certain, I'm not sure what exactly to call it, but a certain drift in gender critical accounts online that I was following, or just comments that I observed.
Yeah.
And I felt like there's this rush at a very a willingness to just discard everything that is laying around, So everything is just tainted now. We don't want any of that. This can go, this can go. Then DI can go. I don't know, HR departments should go. So much should just go. And in the middle of all of that sat intersectionality. So because there are some, I call them influencer feminists, So some big online accounts of women who claim to be feminists, and they dictate through slogans what they think feminism is and should be and has to be, and say things like, if your feminism isn't this and this and this and that, it's not feminism. So there's this group of queer feminists or liberal feminists, you would call them differently in some countries, that have made intersectionality completely useless. Not only useless, but more than that. But so when people think of intersectionality, some people, maybe younger people or those who have not been so involved in an activist or academic setting with intersectionality, when they think of it, they really just think of that as code for, well, men can be women. And that's intersectionality on both sides, that's the side that uses it, and also the side that then no longer wants to use it. But I come not only from a time and a generation, but a political position where intersectionality means something completely different. Now, when I talk about intersectionality, it does not mean at all. It has nothing to do with men saying that they are women. And it has to do, as you say, with, issues of race, class, and sex, and also to factor in other aspects that might be relevant, and to think about when they are relevant, how, in what way, and then what happens either in a social context, on a relational level, or on a structural level or systemic level. And I think these are very valuable reflections to have and discussions, and maybe sometimes also to do something about it. Now, to leave all of that out and say we're not having these discussions. On the contrary, don't even dare go there, because then we will now again shun you, but from the other side and for a different reason, because you dare to pick up a concept that we collectively decided to discard. And that's what motivated me to write this text or this reflection. And I saw in practice, in my work, so I truly believe that it's relevant because I've experienced this in work, but I also have, of course, a biography as a lesbian woman with a migrant background, a woman of color. I do have these reflections. And not only to understand myself and myself in the world and the society that I live in, but also in exchange with others who share similar experiences, maybe. That's on the personal level. But I also worked on issues where, when I worked with women in the sex industry, it was with the migrant women's organization, and we worked with migrant women, not because we went and we were picky about who we work with, but because the reality of the sex industry across most Western European countries is that you will have 70 to 90% of the women in the sex industry are migrant women. And you have to understand both aspects to make a proper analysis of what is going on there. So I think as an analytical tool, intersectionality is valuable. And also on a personal level, we have to be able to talk about racism and discrimination among ourselves, without then fear of being branded as either woke or something else that we no longer want to have and don't want to have in our middle, because we constantly keep falling into this trap of repeating things. So we have the danger of the policing, the exclusion, the shunning, the dogmatism. And so we are repeating that, but always we think, well, but this is with the right cause. This is with the right intention. Now we're on the right side. So that's what I'm observing. And with Athena, well, as I'm directing Athena, I think everybody in the team is aware of it, but we don't discuss it in detail. And one of the things that I always tell new people, volunteers, but also those who join us on the expert network or in another function, I tell them that we do not police each other's positions. That's so we try not to fall out with each other, but we do not police each other's positions. We have to be able to bear that someone else might hold thoughts or positions that we do not agree with, and this is what we all have to be able to, to have the capacity for.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's a great answer. If we can open the Q&A now for those who have questions, any of the guests who are here, if you could please type it into the Q&A section, and we'll get as many as we can before we let Faika go back to either the conference or rest, or hopefully maybe there's a party at the conference tonight. But I know you're in the middle of a 3-day, I think it's a 3-day event in Dublin, is it? Or
no, actually, it's only today. It's only today. Yes, and it was very good, very successful, very impressive. Really.
Good.
So what a few women can do when they come together and set their mind to it.
That's right. Fantastic. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. What I'll do is open the Q&A, Faika, and then I'll pull questions from there for you. So, everybody's probably trying to get onto their keyboard now. So I wanted to ask you something else about Athena before we hear from somebody else. Is there any funding that you get from anywhere?
Well, we get small donations,
Donations. Okay.
and we're very grateful for that
No.
because we know that sometimes women, most of the time, we also do have men, give to a number of organizations,
Mm-hmm.
but and we're a new group now, and they also give to us,
Mm-hmm.
and often there's not a lot of money around, so we're really, really grateful.
Mm-hmm.
We get small donations ranging from €5 a month to 10 on average,
Mm-hmm.
very few that are more. And
Mm-hmm.
we have around 300, I think, monthly regular donors. So that is the resources that we have, they are very scarce.
Yeah.
So they allow me to travel
Mm.
here, for example. They allow us to print our materials. They allow us to pay expenses that we have software and other costs. But we're all volunteers, and that's very demanding.
Yeah.
So we're really looking for funding,
Right.
but at the same time, which is very funny, the trans activist organizations have been spreading rumors that we are funded by this and that,
Of course.
either the US or Hungary or whoever.
Of course.
And yeah, it's very far from reality.
Right. Right. And yes, that's there. But they're the ones that have the ear of all those organizations. They have the ear,
Yes,
and they are allowed to have an audience with the UN
yes,
and the EU, and
absolutely. Yeah.
because that's
Yeah, they have incredible, unbelievable funding. They get dozens of millions of euros
hmm
in funding from the Commission, from the philanthropic foundations.
hmm
They have so many resources,
hmm
and they have open doors. And open doors to the expert meetings, to the hearings, the consultations. So that's really the playing field is not level at all.
No. Are you aware of any other constituencies of people? I mean, women's groups don't have that access, I don't imagine. Are there any other groups, or or do trans activists have a particular in?
No, they do have particular access, absolutely,
Hmm
because
hmm
a lot of philanthropic foundations have set up with that focus.
Yes.
Um, and so they come from the US, but sometimes also I don't know, Netherlands have been quite strong for some time, and they are really set up to advance the most disadvantaged. And in their understanding, that's when you do LGBTIQ plus, whatever that is. And so, of course, the trans activists always have to press the urgency. So
Yes.
it's very, very urgent. We are
Right.
under attack, and so the trans activists, for example, they are calling the UK Supreme Court ruling, they're calling that fascist. But they are not only pointing at Trump and the US and say, well, that's fascist, but they're also pointing at a Western democracy, at a high court judgment from a
Right.
Western democracy, and shamelessly they are calling that fascist because
Right.
they don't like the outcome. And then they say, well, look, everywhere things are getting worse for us.
Right.
And then there are somewhere, I don't know, in the global south, there are some trans individuals that are in a very dire situation.
hmm
And so then with that reference, they manage to press the urgency and get
Right.
funding, funding, funding.
Right. Right. I'm learning from a couple of people that our Q&A, oh, there we go. Wasn't working. Now it's open. Um, Somebody has a question here. How do mothers fit into the idea of intersectionality? Is that unpaid, outsourced labor? Do you have any thoughts on that, uh, Pika?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of issues can play into intersectionality. I think we can definitely have a look at motherhood. But if we look at motherhood with intersectionality, then you can broaden it up and you can
Hmm.
look at, well, not only motherhood, and that's a dimension of women as a sex
Hmm.
class,
Hmm.
but you can also look at young mothers. You
Hmm.
can look at single mothers. You can look
Hmm.
at Black women who are mothers. You can look
Hmm.
at women with disabilities who are mothers. So
Hmm.
you could broaden it, of course, but you
Hmm.
can also look at motherhood in its own right in
Hmm.
a patriarchal framing or context or society, state regulation. So I think all of that is legitimate and good and important. There is only this danger with intersectionality, and that's how we then got to a bit where we are now, is that if it diversifies into very small categories, which at one point it started to become, was not about the big categories of difference, which are race, class, and sex.
Hmm.
But then you add on and you add on and then you add on and you diversify it like that, then you move towards infinity.
Right.
And infinity or very high level of individuality, so that every difference is no longer difference of an axis or a certain class, but it's an individual difference. It's
Right.
my individual difference,
Right.
and that is where you get the dot issue. You know, you have to add on, add on, add
Right.
on, like with the LGBTIQ acronym, and that's where you end up in queer theory.
Right.
So there is a bridge over there, of
Right.
course.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I see what you mean. And I know because of my, I've been around for a while in feminist organizing. I remember going to conferences decades ago, and all these things were brought to bear on our events, or particularly in lesbian communities. There was childcare, there was subsidies for food if people needed it. So class was taken into consideration. People talked about race and racism in Canada, particularly at the time, Indigenous women. Um, so these are important things, and mothers were part of the conversation, because a lot of single mothers, and then a lot of single mothers who were then lesbians, needed childcare and support. And these things aren't happening quite like they were before. These things aren't being
Mm.
considered as much when women gather. But I see what you mean by it can go on and on until everybody's included too. So there's a couple more questions here. Linda's asking, do you see an area that's promising for any specific attention or action in your work? A light coming through a crack. Uh, I know it's early
Well,
days with Athena, so.
yeah, and it's a very hopeless situation that we are faced with, or that we are facing. Well, I mean, of course, we do have hope, and we also see effects of our work. So slowly, people have heard of us. They recognize us. They remember that they read something that we put out there. So it is not hopeless at all, but it will take a very long time. What I do find positive is that there are more and more that do not only activate themselves around this issue, but also connect with each other. So that's really fantastic, even across Europe. And I think that that's very good. In Europe, for a long time, we have turned our attention towards the UK because so much is going on there, and so many of us get their information and input about these issues from X. And on
Mhm.
X, you have many accounts from the UK, and you can follow that. And then we will know across Europe, in different countries, we will know of every court case that's happening in the UK. We will know every article of the week that has been published around this issue. We
Mhm.
will know maybe even every fallout that is happening in the gender critical sphere. But by following that, you obsess a little bit about what's going on there, and you forget that you have your other context, because that's maybe not so promising or much more difficult to take on. So it is tempting to turn elsewhere. And what we have to do is to face each other in this European context. We have to become as knowledgeable about what's going on in Norway, what's going on in Spain, what's going on in Greece, what's going on in Ireland, as we are about what's going on in the UK. And I think that is a challenge, but it's also very, very interesting and motivating to people to understand that those in the UK are like almost out of a soap opera that we're following, but that there are others in our European context that have experienced something similar, more
Yes.
real people, and and to get in touch with them and to be with touching them and to discuss about our realities here. So I think that's something that's really, really positive.
Yes. Yeah. And when you and I were talking before the webinar, and you were asking about how we continue to go on too, you know, it's one by one. I feel like it's reaching other people is the way that we can see some success
Yes.
more than anything here right now, because it's slow, and it'll be slow for you. And you're talking about many different countries, cultures, languages, and countries have their own laws and legislation, and the European Union has, laws and legislation. So it's much more complex there than it is in Canada, for sure. Here's a question. When women open their eyes to what's happened, they typically ask me, how did this happen? I have my answer, but I'm interested in your analysis, how we ended up here and over what time period. Interesting.
Ooh, this is very difficult to answer, and especially to answer maybe not talking for 20 minutes or so about it. I think one of the, I mean, this has many different strands, yes, and that they all contributed. There's an academic one, there's an activist one. There might be, you will find in different fields. You can go into sexology, into psychology. In different fields, you will find different responsibilities, including with feminist discourses also. So you have that, but I think for something to become so luring for people in power and in power positions, I'm thinking politicians, for example, there are maybe two other aspects of it. One is how an older generation that is maybe much more knowledgeable about these things, can tell, intersectionality from, I don't know, fake intersectionality or influencer or activists or whatever terminology you have around it. So you do have an older generation that is also differently embedded in reality, leaves a position of responsibility. No, so you would have that there is a certain responsibility that comes with some positions. You have a function in an organization or just in society, and these ideas come in, or there's an ideological or a dogmatic push for it, and there is a responsibility in applying scrutiny to it and drawing a line. And I think that there is almost like an educational attitude that has become anti-authoritarian in a way that you do not draw these lines, you do not draw these boundaries. You step out of your responsibility that comes with your role. You cannot properly fulfill your role anymore. At the same time, there is a very dangerous and shocking extent of authoritarianism that comes then from the whole sector that you are in. So I think I find that there's a tension around the way that dogma and well, to have authority or to be authoritarian. And the tension between these two is not aligned. So, I would expect politicians to have the level of responsibility and scrutiny and authority around issues that are brought forward by activists, whether
Mhm.
it's trans activists or general activists,
Mhm. Mhm.
NGO, civil society sector.
Mhm.
But that's not happening. No, that's not happening anymore, and it has not been happening for quite some time. And then when you see from the activist side that you can push for things
Mhm.
and you get it,
Mhm.
you continue to push for more and more and more.
Mhm.
And I'm not particularly angry with the trans activists that make outrageous demands, because why shouldn't they? If they can get by with it, but with the institutions and with the politicians, with the media also, that fail to either uphold reality, establish safeguards, or just understand not only what is right and wrong, but also their role.
Mhm.
Their role as politicians is not, or as a political party, is not to take up activist demands and turn them into their party program. So I think there's a failure on so many levels, and especially within the institutions and the understanding of the role within those institutions.
Yeah, it's been too easy, hasn't it? It's been so easy for the activists, like you say. Um, every time that someone taps on a door, it opens, and it's this guilt. Um, it's this guilt of, well, it's partly the attachment to lesbian and gay rights. Although we sure did, we had a hard time breaking the doors down to get
Yeah,
protection and Charter of Rights and human rights here. It was not easy. It was a small group. There was no big hoopla about it. There was no big celebration. The general public didn't even know about it, and many still don't know how we did it in the 19 around 1990 in Canada, um, give or take a couple of years, and yet this group attaching to us. Some people say, oh, well, people felt guilty about how they treated lesbian and gay people, so this is now part of the lesbian and gay. But I mean, I see that a little bit, and that might be true in the UK, but I don't know exactly why it's so was so easy, and that people saying, I mean, part of it too is always this: we're the most threatened and we're the most murdered and harmed, and you don't need statistics or evidence; you just say it. Yeah, it's very interesting how how this has happened and how easy it's been, and it continue, more. And then if I put my hand up and said I need more money, I would get more money if I was in that.
hmm
I mean, maybe it's changing a little bit here, starting to, but there's still any government or media or education or institution is still standing firm with, we're doing the right
yeah.
thing, we're
And
doing the
and
right
then
thing.
I think, the ground on which all of this falls is misogyny.
Yes.
It is sexism, and
Yes.
it's also laziness. It's
Yes.
political laziness.
Yes.
So, but this is not necessarily very new, but they are met with demands that appear to be so progressive
Yes.
that would legitimize their laziness in terms of
Yes.
scrutinizing it.
It's an easy thing to agree to. They don't have to do too much. Yes, they
Yeah.
don't have to change. They don't have to provide more housing necessarily, or provide elderly people with more money, or it's just like, yes, we agree with this and this is important and good. Yeah, it is. It's infuriating, really. There's another question here. Thank you for establishing such a credible opposition. And does the organization share strategies and resources? Now, it might be a bit early to ask that, but I know there's a lot of material on your
Yeah.
on your website.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources, I think, already online. So there's this report that I mentioned,
Mhm.
but then we also write policy briefs around, well, certain things that come up where we think it would be good to have a comprehensive analysis of it. And we have articles that we write ourselves and publish on certain things, developments, also to give it more context and our framing. And all of that is online.
Mhm.
Um, Strategies. I'm not sure if I get the question right, whether we share strategies. So we would be very happy and open to having, internal meetings with other groups and share our experience and our perspective and also maybe our suggestions when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to strategy.
Mm-hmm.
This is a discussion that always depends on the context of a group, the national context, the political context, and
Right.
every
Right.
group would know that best.
Yes.
Um, and also where they want to go, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Well, I think we're gonna end us on time here, Fika. So we only keep you for the 90 minutes that we said we would. And before I thank Fika, I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar. If you appreciate our webinars, you can go to our website and email us with a request to join our mailing list or add other people to the mailing list. If you're able to make a donation to cover costs for our education programs. And most importantly, our webinars are recorded. They're posted on a YouTube channel. If you have friends, family, colleagues, anybody around the world, of course, it's open to everybody to look at. It's the wonderful thing about having these on a recording. People can watch this conversation, view this conversation online in the near future. And I'd truly now like to thank Fika taking the time to speak with us in the evening when you're over there on a job in Dublin. And the work that you're doing is so inspirational. You speak about it in a way that's so easy to hear and listen to, yet so comprehensive when it's such complicated work that you're doing. And you're the right spokeswoman for it, because I'm just really impressed and thrilled that you were able to come and talk to us at Women's Base Vancouver. And
Thank you.
I
Thank you
hope,
so much, Chris.
yeah,
I was really happy when we set the date. I was really happy that we do it on the eve of International Women's Day.
yes,
I'm really happy
yes,
about that. And thank
yes,
you for everything that you are doing, especially in Canada, and that you're not giving up, and that you're organizing and you're doing all of these publicly available
yes,
talks and discussions.
yes. You all keep up the work. We'll keep watching you. And happy International Women's Day, everyone. And thanks for making this happen. And thank you, Fika.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Bye bye.
Bye.